Hey, it's Vladimira,
And I'm Nektarios.
and this is Naked by the Future Farm.
Join us as we strip entrepreneurship to its vulnerable core.
Well, welcome Fatin on Naked of the Future Farm. It's wonderful to have you.
Hi, Fatin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Especially at this godly hour of 8:33 p.m. in Pakistan. How are you doing today? It's during Ramadan, so I think you should be full of energy right now, but I don't want to presume.
This is actually like the best part of the day for me during
Mm.
Ramadan because it's an hour after we open our fast. You've had your coffee, you're fresh. So yeah, that's why I insisted that it's after iftar because before iftar, everyone's just like slugging through the day and it's just like dry throat.
Yeah, I was
And we
saying-
stay up.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
we
was
stay
saying
up
to
pretty-
Nektarios that if we catch you at 4 p.m., that might not be a good time, and then that we get all these invites for like midnight happenings and socials, and I was like, what is wrong with people? But no one understands. So I think it's
So,
like,
Yeah,
yes.
no, so I'm actually playing the Ramadan volleyball tournament, and that starts at 8 p.m. and it ends at 1 a.m. And
Oh
the
my
court is
God.
full of people. Yeah, full of people, full of families, children, everyone's there. So it's actually a very festive time. Yeah, so people, but it does get in the way of, the next day at work is a little slow, but we all try working after iftar as well. So this is normal for us this
Mhm.
month. Yeah.
Well, so lovely having you in this special period. Nektarios, you are usual setting.
In my usual setting
gives
in
it away.
London, and
Mhm.
it's 3:30 in the afternoon here.
Sunday. So also a
Sunday.
And it
little
looks
bit of
like a nice, bright, sunny day.
It's okay. It's a spring day, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit chilly. But nobody's complaining. Could be a lot worse.
So it's quite special for today's recording for a number of reasons. I think for me personally, because we are both of us Fatin in Pakistan, not in the same cities. So I'm recording from Karachi and you are in Lahore.
Lahore.
I got that
Yes.
right? In Lahore.
Yeah.
We've known each other now for a few years.
Mhm.
I've been sort of watching your journey as an entrepreneur in your latest venture, Smartline. And when I was talking to Nektarios about bringing you on and inviting you on Naked, I remembered how very vocal and honest in our very first conversation when we met in Punjab Club in Lahore, you were with me.
Yes.
It was in one-on-one, of course, but still we didn't know each other. And I felt like, okay, this is a pretty reflective, awesome founder and a woman, and there's a lot that she has to share with the world. So when the opportunity came, I was very excited about sort of co-creating it together. So today it is. I'm also quite excited because this is one of our, not yet closing, but it's one of our latest episodes within this series with Flourish Ventures, the fintech fund. And the reason why I'm mentioning them, because all three of us are actually also fintech founders.
Fintech.
And there is a lot in terms of commonalities of the journey and also the reason why Flourish decided to sort of support the cause of mental health of founders. So all that together, really awesome to have you on the show. And when I was thinking how to start, not to make it yet immediately personal and too deep, but also we never start shallow. So I think it would be really interesting for our listeners to understand, Fatin, where in your journey as a serial founder building in emerging markets, there will be a lot of other layers and identities that we'll introduce about you, but where in your journey the mental health came in? And if you help us understand that timeline and what was happening for you, I think we can then sort of take it from that direction. There will be a lot to unpack.
Interesting. Okay. So, again, thank you guys so much for having me here, and like you said, sometimes I do have the tendency to be a bit too honest. I don't know if that always goes in my favor, but yes, that is something that's always there. Okay, so in terms of when did mental health come into my entrepreneurial journey, so I would like to establish that I have always not always. I mean, from a very young age, been aware that I do have anxiety, right? So it's not something that started, once I started work. And I was very blessed because my parents, at a young age, there was a certain situation that took place at home, and then after that, they saw some symptoms in me, and they took me to a therapist, which it was unheard of back then, but I think that was very responsible and forward thinking of them, and they did that. So I was always aware that I had a tendency to get anxious, and but it's something that I worked on, and I went on. I was a great student. I went on to college. I got great grades. I came back. I had a job. Everything was fine. So for many, many years in the middle, it had then taken a back seat because I had done the basic work, with it. When it really sort of caught me off guard was this would be about in 2016, right? I had just started my first venture, it was actually an agency with my partner Adam. And so we were the first of its kind turnkey e-commerce solution providers, right? And that experience was everything. It was, we were building, designing, running, managing e-stores. We were, to all the largest retailers of the country. So if, you're from Pakistan, so you're aware of names like Khadi and Nishat, these would be equivalent, not in
Big
size,
deals.
but for the country, like a Zara or a Topshop of the country. So we were building out their entire e-commerce experiences. And very soon we climbed to the very top of the ladder, right? And it was just such an exciting time. And then all of a sudden, so right in the beginning, less than a year into it, when we're getting all these clients and we're doing really well, my biggest client sort of just left us overnight, and that is something that happens in markets like Pakistan. You can have contracts in place, but clients don't value those contracts, right? And so they had a very large sum of money they owed us, and they just logged us out of this. So the CEO actually messaged me and asked me for the username and password to the back end of his website. And I was like, well, normally we don't share this. And he's like, come on, Fatin, it's me asking, come on, I just want to have a look at, things. So I gave it to him. And when I woke up in the morning from 7 a.m. onwards, my entire team had just been logged out of all our accounts, and he stopped responding to my messages. And I think when I think about it now and if I do see him ever in public, if I do ever run into him, I will ask him why it had to be done like that, because it could have been done in a much more normal, civilized way, right? Like, hey, no one's bound to work with you forever, right? There's a contract, there's a 30 or 60-day notice period. If he wanted to shorten that, he could have. Anyway, so it sort of happened overnight, right? And the reason that he gave us was that his team was not happy with our performance, which wasn't true. The reason was that we were performing way too well, and they didn't want to pay us what they owed us based on the contract they had signed with us. So instead of having an uncomfortable conversation about renegotiating the contract, they just decided, let's just freeze them out and take it in-house, right? And we'll hire resources. Now this is my very first company, right? So it's my very first experience with something like this. I'm like, wait, everything was fine. First year we're making money. We just moved into a new office. And then he went on to poach half my team and pay them double what we were paying them, right? So me and my partner were like, wait a second, I thought you weren't happy with our work, but you want the same people to do your work because you're hiring the entire team, and you're taking them in-house with you. So I think that was, one major, the first major shockwave I ever faced, in my own sort of business. I was young. I was 26 years old. And
so how did you, sorry, sounds like you said, like a shock wave, or certainly a massive trigger, right? And I think, thank you for being so open about also having the experience with anxiety from very young age, because we were also talking with Nektarios prior recording, is that this is something where it is still stigmatized and often neglected. Nektarios was mentioning, so we can deep dive into it. But just to connect the dots, was this a trigger for you? And if I'm sort of jumping and being too fast, tell me, but I trying to connect the dots here, right? So
Yeah.
what happened after
So
this?
what happened was that, so let's say, so this was sort of the first setback I ever faced, and, as a owner of a business, right? As in, while running my own company, this was the first major setback, and it sort of happened overnight. And, we couldn't really make sense of it. It was all sorts of unfair. At 26, you're just like, this is just wrong. They can't hire my team. They told me they don't like my work. Couldn't really, so it took us a while to wrap our heads around that. I mean, today when stuff like that happens, or it's part of the game, you take it in your stride. You're always prepared for it. You're not like married to any one client, right? But what happened then was that as a result of that, 2 3 other clients also left us. So we went from being right up there to overnight, within the week, having no clients, and then having a team. We had within a year grown to a team of 50 people. So it's not just about when you lose a job, it's just about your job, right? When you have a team of people who are like family to you, because that's the culture we had sort of built. You have to worry about running payroll, running the 50 people that are earning for their families, right? So I think so that was the beginning, but that's not when my real burnout happened, because what happened right after that was that I had to go into survival mode, right? So me and my partner had to sort of double down on the work, travel. Like, we'd be in Karachi, Islamabad, Lahore, like 3 4 times a week. It's very different when you go out pitching to clients while you have a list of 4 5 of the strongest clients in the country with you, and it's very different when you've lost them all in a week. And then you go out and try getting new work, right? So we signed on all sorts of deals. We made very, very ambitious promises with really, really tight deadlines. In retrospect, would I go back and do that? No, because it not only affected our physical health and my team's physical health, but we didn't know any better because we were in survival mode, right? And then within another 3 4 months, we were right up there again, because we got an even bigger client, and then other big clients followed that big client, and then again we were at the very top. So I'm talking about, I would say, a year after the first incident happened, we go into survival mode. We work, work, work. We bring all these people on board. Everything is set. Everything is now sort of running smoothly, and we've dominated the market again. And that's when it sort of happened, right? Like, I feel like, because I wasn't in survival mode anymore. And I think
Can you tell us a little bit what happened?
Yeah, I just became, I think, when I was finally in a good place again and we were finally on top, it was like this debilitating, like, sort of fear of ever going back to that place again.
Okay.
So I was sort of sitting, being like, okay, everything is okay now, but oh my God, like, I never want to go back to where I was, like, what if that ever happens again? Will it ever happen again? And then, yeah, I still remember the day when that thought, sort of dawned on me. And then it was just a series of events, which eventually, sort of looked like I couldn't even, I just became so consumed with that fear that I couldn't even, that all of a sudden, from being someone who wasn't scared of anything, who, was out like killing it and, built the business back up, and I became I was afraid of everything. I was afraid.
Fatin, what would that mean on a day-to-day basis,
On a
you,
day-to-day
right? So you're
basis,
running the business. So what happened? What was Fatin sort
yeah,
of
so
look
like
at
I
that point?
said, there was one day after things were good and things were going really, really good, that, when I was just sitting and I sort of had this thought and I started feeling jittery, and I was like, wait, I haven't felt like this in many, many years. Okay. So I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, I'm getting anxious. And then initially the first few days, like I said, I was just afraid, and I didn't know what I was really afraid of, but there were thoughts like, what if I go back there? What will happen? Will I be able to come back again? Yes, I'm back now, but what if, like the what if to, another catastrophe happening. And then how that looked was that every time, it's very normal in the service sector to sort of get an email at 11 p.m., from a client. They just do that. They don't respect boundaries here. And we kind of work around the clock. So, every time I would get an email which was not at a normal hour, I'd be like, oh my God, I don't want to open this email, because what if this client is emailing me to tell me, why is he emailing me at 11 p.m.? Is it to tell me that they're leaving? While everything would be going perfectly fine, right, at work, because that's the experience I had a year ago, right? And then I sort of started operating from a place of fear, a lot of decisions you start taking. And then eventually it just, I sort of went down that hole so bad that I just didn't even want to come into work, right? So what that sort of looked like was I would leave home because I didn't want my family to know or to, sort of realize that I'm not coping. And I didn't get it, right? I was like, wait, this should have happened when the clients left me. Why is this happening now, a year later, when everything is good? Right. And now, because I've done the work, I know that I was in survival mode. And, when everything was fine, it sort of just, all came up then. So I would leave my house because, like I said, I didn't want my family to know that I was struggling with what they would have thought were just nonsensical thoughts because everything is fine. My friends wouldn't get it because they'd be like, what do you mean everything is fine? Yes, that happened. Something bad happened, but everything's okay now, right? So I would leave my home and I would go to the office, but I just wouldn't be able to get out of my car. Right. And there came a point where, like, for a couple of weeks, my family thought I was at work, and my co-founder at work thought I wasn't coming to work and I was home, but I would just be in my car, like driving to office and not being able to get out. And it was tough because I thrived in my, like, at work. Like, I was my best, I was like, if someone were to ask me, like, what's your favorite time of the day, it would be during the day at work. I loved it. So yeah, and
So can I quickly come in, Fatin? This is really important for us. And I really, really appreciate you said pretty much everything you said, because it gives us so many anchors in the conversation. And the first thing I just want to acknowledge is that you telling us that your anxiety led you to be sitting in your car, not being able to get out of it. That gives color to what it actually means when we talk about anxiety, because people use the word in the same way that people say, oh, I'm a little bit depressed. There's no such thing as a little bit depressed. In the same way, you're not a little bit anxious. Your anxiety is a real thing that has real consequences. And I'm so grateful that you talk about that. And the things that you mentioned, and I'm saying this a little bit also for our audience, right? When people talk about anxiety, it's things like the what ifs, this constant what ifs, to get into these loops, the catastrophizing. They're always assuming the worst case scenario, where your rational brain perfectly well knows, as you're describing, we're in a good place. There's no reason for that. But there's this other loop going, no, it's going to get worse and it's going to get bad because you had that place of pain a year ago, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important also in the context, and I'm going to take a little detour, because in the UK last week, there was a minister who made a statement about all this mental health at work conversations a little bit exaggerated and people are just using it as an excuse, not understanding or acknowledging the real life manifestations of something. And I'm saying this with inverted commas, as simple as anxiety. Because it isn't trivial. It really means that somebody who's a high achiever like you, who had a business with the biggest clients in Pakistan, having to live this weird life that doesn't make sense to anybody on the outside, where your co-founders think you're at home and your parents or your family thinks you're at work, and you're sitting in your car. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? So thank you. Because that's exactly what it can do. And I think it's really important to, in the context of destigmatizing, also detrivializing the conversation. So how did you get out of this? What happened?
Like I said, and then, obviously when I was missing from work for a couple of weeks, right? Like, again, I'm talking about this was now around 2017. These were still, I don't think, by the way, my co-founder, he's like family. He's my co-founder in my current business as well. But, like everybody has ups and downs with their co-founders. And I wouldn't say that he wasn't understanding, is he didn't know any better. He didn't get it, So that is something I cannot, and I've had very open conversations with him about it today, because today he gets it, Today I get it when he's going through something. But till that point, he was fortunate enough to have never gone through it, and he didn't get it, When you would, now you can be like, yeah, I'm not going to come do that. I'm just feeling a little anxious. And your friends would be like, yeah, don't worry, stay home. Back then it's like, what do you mean you have anxiety? I don't understand when people tell me they have anxiety,
But so you approached him with that intention of, let me share what I was going through?
So no. So while I was going through it became really sort of tough between us, because he just thought that now that things were good, I just wasn't showing up to work and I wasn't interested, right? Because even he couldn't connect it. He was like, things are fine. You should have had you should have been freaking out a year ago. And a year ago, you were all over the place, right? Like going out, doing the work, everything. So that relationship was getting strained. And, like I said, it was my favorite place to be during the week, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, right? I loved every bit of it. I loved my coffee. I loved my, being on my desk with my candle on. And I still do take my dogs to work. So, my pups would be there, and I loved the kids we were working with. They were just such a breath of fresh air, because Lahore can be it's a small-ish city. We have a small bubble that, we all roam around in, and conversation gets
today's about 20, how many millions of people, just to be precise? The smallish city of Lahore.
I think 20, it's like 215 Pakistan, so Lahore would be like 20.
I think so. It's like 4 Slovakias together. But yeah, let's continue. No.
Good, yeah. But basically, we all grew up in a bubble, and conversation gets pretty stagnant. And it's just, the people I was working with, they were from all walks of life, and really talented, intelligent, lovely kids, So I loved it. So at one point, when things got really bad with my co-founder, and I was like, okay, he doesn't get it, and I have to do something, because I miss it, And so much of who I was as a person post-college, which was another problem, and we can talk about that later, is that my sense of self, so much of it was attached to who I was at work, right? And then not being able to sort of be that person who like goes in and closes a client, and like who like does these like, great deals, and like meets these impossible deadlines. So, and my sense of self was so closely linked to that. So I was having a really tough time sort of being in this place, and I knew something had to be done. And right then, like I said, because I had gone to therapy before, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into therapy again, but the thing with therapy is that you go in, and it's not all, maybe it's just not the right fit the first time round, and that's one of the mistakes a lot of people make, is that they'll give it a try once, and if it's not the right fit, they'll just be like, oh, therapy is not for me. That doesn't mean therapy isn't for you. It just means that the therapist you went to, the type of work they do is not the right fit, maybe, with what you need, right? So I sort of stayed on. So I went through, it's a bit of a painful, journey, because you don't, going up and sort of, bringing things up and giving them context and speaking about it again and again, and, going and meeting a new person every single time, right? But I did it because I was very, very committed to I wanted to get out of that car. I just wanted to be able to be present in the moment, and I wanted my life back, right? And I had so much more to do. We had just scratched the surface, right? So I really threw myself in, like, full time, at one point, I was working with a therapist. I joined an anxiety group, which was the first anxiety group that ever was created in the, sort of country. I don't think there's any, I've never heard of any other anxiety group. And it brought about 15 of us together. And the facilitator was absolutely like magical with the way she, sort of did it. And it just, it was there, and everybody who joined that group, it was such a safe space. And I feel like that's the first of its kind sort of safe space that we got, because everybody who joined was so ready to try anything to be able to get their head around what they were going through. Right. So yeah, so that was a very, very, very powerful sort of experience in my healing journey. And then I stayed in one-on-one therapy. I'm still in one-on-one therapy. Even if my therapist thinks we can take some time off, I'm like, no, you're not leaving me.
It's part of your
Because
system.
it's part of
It's
my
the
system.
gym.
Sometimes it's nothing, but it's just great to have something that keeps you grounded. So I've made it a part of my system. And then I'm up for anything. I did everything. I did sound bowl healing, I did theta healing, I did Reiki, meditation, you name it.
You're in it
And
fully.
and some things clicked and some things didn't, but nothing ever harmed you, right? And then and I remember writing down once, my therapist asked me to write down, okay, what's the immediate goal, what do you really want, And I just remember writing, I just want to be able to go back and sit on my chair and drink my cold coffee and be in my room with my music and candles on. And I just wanted to be able to go back there and then be myself again, So even today, sometimes, when I'm having a good day, it's a nice, bright day, and, and I'm sitting and I'm having my coffee and I have that same setting. I'm just like, it just reminds me, it's like, you wanted this, you have this. Remember how far you've come, from then up to now. Because in that moment, you don't know if it's ever going to happen for you again, at the risk of sounding dramatic. Literally, because when you're in that state, you're like, oh my God, I'm not that person anymore. This will never happen for me again. So yeah, so it was a couple of months of really, really doing the work, without which I don't think, I could have gotten back as quick as I did. So yeah, so that's what I kind of did then.
This is Naked by the Future Farm.
Join us as we strip entrepreneurship to its vulnerable core.
One thought there is that when I was listening to you, there were two strong takeaways for me, and one sort of still is in my mind, makes me dazzled, which is the sense of loneliness, which I felt when you were describing the experience of sitting in the car for whatever the period was. And I was thinking about other people that might be sort of in a similar situation, where people around you, even though it sounds like you tried, they just don't get you, right? And for whatever reason, I mean, we are not coming into this with judgment, right? Everyone is in their own unique context and experience. And so I was thinking about that lonely experience, and this can go deep and deep and deep, because it's like a cycle in your head. And then you mentioned, Fatin, that you had this strong sense of urge because you wanted to go back to that place that you missed so much, right? And I think there was also that, I think another layer, the connection with the self-worth and the identity, and it's just like, who am I if I'm not this? So, but it's still quite a big leap that I'm thinking about, is to sort of be in the car and finding the therapist, like being able to actually do the action of like finding a therapist, going, and especially if it was like you said, that it maybe didn't work on the first or second time and you kept going and explore. So that made me think, like, what is it? Because for some folks, and we've had a number of founders that were sharing somehow resembling similar experience, where they were saying that to go to a post office from a bed was the very first sort of action, and it was really, really tough. So speaking of dramatizing, for some people, it was as primary as really getting out of the bed. And so maybe there's no question in there, but just a reflection of like how strong drive within you did you have? And I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts around it that allowed you to do that work, that hard work that you keep talking about.
I just, again, at the risk of it sounding like a cliche, I think it was just two things. I had so much more to do, right? And I was like, no, 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 no. This cannot be the reason I don't do what I have to do. I still have so much more to do. I mean, it's not like I did any one thing in particular after that, but it was just, and I just really missed my old self. I missed it, And, in that sense, when you talk about, the loneliness and, when it comes to your thoughts and what you're feeling through this time, I remember when I went for my first session of group therapy for the anxiety group, it was a little awkward. I was late because again, I was like, should I go? Should I not? Should I go? Should I not? And then I just got up and I went. And within the first 10 minutes, I was like, okay, I don't think I'm ever coming back here again. Okay. Like none of these women are from the world I'm from. They don't get it. I didn't know anything about them and I was making all these judgments, right? And I was like, I won't be back. And then right before leaving, the facilitator, Tanya, she said something to me and, that sort of stuck with me. And that's something I'm not going to say. But, and then I found myself going back. And the beauty of group therapy, and now I just sound like I'm an advocate for group therapy, but the beauty is that when you're sitting in a room and that's when you realize it's not just you. It's exactly what you guys are trying to do, right? Get stories out from founders so other founders realize that it's not just them, right? So when you're in that room, and sometimes you talk about some irrational thoughts or fears or actions that you may indulge in because of that, you're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only person who thought that, or oh my God, I think I thought I was the only person. Because when you're sitting, you don't see your friends manifest those symptoms, right? So you're like, I'm the only person. I wish I was normal. I wish I could be in the moment. And then and when you hear them speak, and these were some women I knew socially, and if you knew them, you would have never guessed any of them were suffering. People who are complete powerhouses, complete, just you would just never know. Through this process, I came across someone who's actually known to be a very good public speaker, and she runs a huge company, and she's always, she looks like boss woman to the core, and then she has anxiety of speaking in front of people, and that it's just, you just don't know, because you just see them come and you just see them perform, and then you don't know what's going on at the back. But when you're sitting in a group setting, and it takes the power away from it, right? So when you think it's just a you problem, and it's just something you've been sort of cursed with these fears and thoughts, you're like, oh, it's just me, and how will I ever get past it? And the minute you hear that someone else has had the same thoughts, or the same or similar fears, or been operating from a similar space, it takes the power away from it, right? And because your anxiety, and then it doesn't control you, your fears stop controlling you, they have less power, your anxiety has less power. So and I think that's what you guys are trying to do here as well, when people hear and realize that other people have also been through those journeys, and that it does become okay, and you do get back, and it just takes the power away from that fear or thought or sort of belief that you're going through at that point. So I think the group therapy was a really, really big part of my journey.
This is really helpful, relevant, interesting, all these things, Fatin. I have a couple of things that I want to reflect on, but it might take us into a different direction, but bear with me. So I have a few people in my life who go through anxiety at the moment. And the first thing you hear is when you go, just tell me, people go, you don't understand. So what you're describing is being in a room where everybody thinks if I told you, you wouldn't understand it, and you realize, of course you do, right? I'm very mindful that you were describing your experience in an environment where everybody you mentioned so far, apart from your co-founder, are women. And I was having recently a conversation with somebody who was saying it's really surprising that most people who nowadays talk about mental health in entrepreneurship are men. because women are probably, and this was an assumption, a little bit cautious that if they start talking about it, it goes into the bucket of women are weak and emotional. So I also want us to make sure
Another
that we
layer to go
acknowledge
through.
that you picked
Oh my
a group.
God, women are weak and emotional. The amount of
We
you know, I
can't
have
put
actually,
another one.
oh my God, but that has nothing to do with this. But I have been called emotional and weak, and by men. Not my founders, they know better, they wouldn't do that. Not my co-founders, but like sometimes. But yeah, and they don't even know my backstory. It's just been just because I'm a girl. So yes, I get it. I get why women may have shied away from it. But actually, in Pakistan, the men are still less likely to come out and talk about it or seek help for it, because it just goes against everything that society and cultural norms have sort of, the sort of bracket, what do you call it? Like a
Systemic structure and
yeah, like a
large,
structure that,
right? I
that they're
mean,
supposed to sort of
be the
be in.
strong and
And
hide emotions. Yes.
yeah, and then, I remember one of my team members, who's a brilliant guy, he was just off, he was just completely off. He was snapping at people. The work wasn't as great. He was snapping at me. He was snapping at my co-founder, Adam. And overall, he was just being a douche, like a big douche. And he was a senior member for like over a month. And then one day I just sat him down. I was like, listen, I've gotten you an appointment. I don't know what's going on in your life. I know you don't want to talk to me about it. You will not talk to me about it. But go to this person and it's paid for. So you have to go now. And it wasn't paid for because he couldn't afford it. It was just paid for because it was like, and this guy was like someone we also needed. He was great at what he did. And he was just acting like a douche, and he wasn't a douche. So yeah, he went in and then he kept going in for a while, and we never asked, he never spoke to us about it, but there was something else that was going on that wasn't work related, but it was manifesting at work. Yeah, so I think that's the first male member of my team I sent to therapy. There've been many others after that.
On that note, Nektarios knows, our listeners know that I brought both of my co-founders, who are senior founders and sort of pioneers in some way, in their own ways in the industry, to therapy. And we had a co-founder therapy, and we had tears, and it was heavily emotional, and the tears were not mine at that state, and they loved it, and it was amazing. But I hear you, and I agree with that, Nektarios, that I think, and maybe it's unless you had something you wanted to go back to, Nektarios, I think there is a bridge here to another topic, Fatin, that we wanted to really talk to you about, because I think it's very unique to your journey and who you are and where you are building your current business, and actually the businesses before, which is Pakistan. And not making this just about Pakistan, but sort of touching on the nuance of early markets, emerging markets, we can call it all the names, early developments where, a lot of the trends are still that, so let's say in Silicon Valley, they're past and they're on their own roller coaster in cycles, and they're just hitting us over here, right? And I think we've seen it in the last sort of 3-4 years. It's been plentiful. So how is it to be a founder, builder, a woman, if I may, to bring up that identity? And there is many identities to you, so I would not want to sort of box you in few. Building your business in a country like Pakistan, are there nuances of those identities that do and the context impact you and your well-being? That's where we are trying to get.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a little, there's so much there. Like,
it was a big bridge.
Like, where do I begin? I'm very mindful of the fact that it is building a new business in any country is challenging, and it comes with its, set group of challenges, right? Being a woman in any other country is also, it comes with its own set group of challenges, building a business in Pakistan and being a woman while building that business in Pakistan, and Pakistan not being Pakistan of 3 years ago, being Pakistan of today, which is completely different, okay, to what we were 3-4 years ago, comes with its own set group of challenges, right? And then when you're navigating them, sometimes lose sight of, am I facing these challenges because I'm an entrepreneur and entrepreneurs face these challenges? Am I facing these challenges because of what's going on in the world right now? Am I facing these challenges because I'm building a business in Pakistan and Pakistan is going through a really tough period right now? And or is it because XYZ happened because, being a woman, I wasn't heard at some points where I should have been, or maybe I was heard, but people made me think I wasn't, because that's also always going on, right? So yeah, so sometimes you sort of lose track of that because there's so many things in the mix. But it's tough. It's not, it's, I'm not tooting my own horn here. It's just, I think for all us founders, you have to be made of something else. It's the days when it's completely backbreaking, because it's not, you can give it your all, you can build a great business, you can do everything right, and then something will happen in the country, and then some investors, LPs, will not allow them to deploy money and pull back a term sheet that they promised you, so
the ambiguity and
that's
things out of
yeah.
control. Mm-hmm.
It's just not in our control, So whether you're a male or a female founder, it's just some things are just not. So navigating, that, so uncertainty, like on that level, and then all the other challenges that come with being a founder in Pakistan. I mean, it's really not for the faint-hearted. You have to be very patient, very, 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 very patient. You have to have, there's a word we have, sabr. Sabr just means, I don't know if you know what sabr.
I actually don't know what it means. This is the first time.
So it's like sabr, patience with grounding, and so it's sort of like you just, yeah. So there's
a
a
version
lot.
of resilience.
No, so sabr is not resilience, but yes, I mean, with sabr, you have resilience. I mean, it's kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, just a lot of that. And then that comes back to, what causes anxiety? Lack of control, right? Lack of control on the outcome, lack of control on a decision, lack of control in a situation, right? And then when there's always, you don't have a control on anything. You don't have a control on where the rupee sort of drops. You don't have a control on which governments may or may not come into power. Nothing, right? So then you sort of have to keep in check and go back to the tools you have learned before, and sort of bring them back in to make sure that today where you are, you can keep moving forward. Because yeah, lack of control and not having, and things being uncertain is a huge trigger. That is, I don't think uncertainty is just my trigger. I think that's one of the biggest triggers for everybody, right? So yeah.
So how do you deal with it then? You painted a picture of a very unpredictable environment throughout all the different identities, right? So, and you mentioned the toolkit. So what are your support mechanisms today to deal on the one side with the current uncertainty, but also with the history that you have of knowing how you respond to certain situations?
Okay, so and it's funny actually, because we recently, very, very recently, just went through a very, very uncertain, patch where it was, we were told that, oh, you're gonna get something on Friday, and then Friday would come and they would say, oh, you'll find out at 6 p.m. So then we'd all wait for 6 p.m. And then we'd get a call saying, that guy, he had a bad stomach, so he didn't attend the call. So now the vote's on Monday. So then all weekend we're like, oh my God, and on Monday you wait, and then it goes on. And this went on for a couple of weeks with us. And if I may say so myself, I was so proud of the way I managed to remain grounded through the process, and I saw my co-founders completely unraveling. Okay, it was almost comic, right? When I'd just be sitting, I'd be like, you shouldn't. That would be me, a few years ago. And I mean, no matter what toolkits you use, you're able to at least separate the reality versus turning something into a catastrophe, right? Thinking worst case scenario, right? Which is very normal to go there as well. So I think I'm able to do that now a lot more. I'm like, no, even if it doesn't happen this way, it doesn't have to be that it's going to be that, and I have to sort of keep going back there, between the two and being like, it doesn't have to be worst come, I mean, worst case scenario, right?
It sounds like
So
a
that's
reference, sorry, Fatin, just
yeah,
reference of perspective. That's what I'm
yes,
seeing there. Is like the fact that you went through such a rough patch and deep experience, and you grinded through it, and you worked through it, and you have that in your backpack, in your toolkit. And now when
yes.
the thing comes, you are like, I know
Yes,
this. I know this one.
because because just to give perspective, like what I went through happened in 2016, right? Around 2016, 2017. And that was a different time and that was a different company. Today I'm running, the agency is running on autopilot and it has its own CEO. And then after that, I built another company, which, my best friend who's super competent and just right for the job, she's running that now. That was more like a passion project. And, that's on its own. And now I'm actually full time on my third thing, which is what I do full time, right? And that's come, and this isn't the first time we faced challenges in there, because we started building that at the end of 2020, like almost 2021, which was the very end of the sort of tech bubble in Pakistan, right? So from day one, that's had its challenges. So we've had to sort of go back and, stay grounded. And sometimes it gets really bad, and then sometimes it gets really good, and then the whole political situation happened in the last 2-3 years. So yeah, so it's not just what I went through the last couple of weeks. It's this constant sort of grounding that you have to go through, right? A lot of punches you have to take in your stride. You have to learn to celebrate the small wins as well, right? And all you can really, at the end of the day do is, if just have faith in your business model, have faith that the business works, right? And it has to work because it works, and
Can I ask you?
yeah, sorry,
I
go on.
was talking to another woman founder here in Pakistan yesterday. Maybe I shouldn't give too much detail because she didn't give me the green light to share her story. So I'll do it in a way that she might not be identified. But the reason why I'm bringing her up is that she has been hustling for about 8 years right now in this environment. And yesterday she said to me, she said, I'm very tired. I love my job. I love the cause, but I'm like really, really tired. And I think the conversation went into, in some way, maybe giving her permission to actually make some changes and stuff. And I wonder, I'm listening to you, and it's such a dichotomy of emotion of like, I hear you because we are grinding as well here, and like I can relate a lot to that experience. And then there's part of me which is like, is there a moment where we hit the glass ceiling again and we are like, Amber, now, because this can go forever in that heavy, resilient, or how are you looking at this part now?
Yeah,
with everything you went through?
I think what my role also, what I realized over the last year has become is, Fatin, like within my organization at least, sort of been like, you have the toolkit, not everybody else does. Okay. And then you're also, when you're the CEO of the company. So it's funny because sometimes we're like, okay, so what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Like, the CFO has certain daily tasks and he has his team, and the CEO has certain daily tasks and then they have the team. And obviously I have my set work that I have to do, but I also constantly have to make sure that the vibe and the environment is conducive to the others believing that it will keep working out every time, there is a sort of dip in something, right? And you see them exhausted, you're exhausted, but but that if the three of you sit in a room and say we're all exhausted and we're done, then it doesn't work like that, right? So you also have to, sort of be that person. And I have been doing a lot of work on disassociating my sense of self from what I do at work. That is something that I've been doing
That's
recently, which I think has really helped me through the last 2 years. I love what I'm building. It's it's basically everything that me and my two co-founders have done over the last 10 years coming together in this product. We love what we've built. We've had a great response from the market. And then just through that, I think I end up playing the role of being the one that grounds the rest of the team, because someone has to do that. Someone has to remain positive. And then my personal work on that end has been to sort of just, thoughts come up again. What if this doesn't work? What if we don't raise more money? What if it just shuts down? Those thoughts cross my mind, but they don't take over my mind. Right? I don't allow them to take over my mind. And if anything, a couple of weeks ago when we were going through this, one of my co-founders called me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm getting a blow dry." He's like, "You're getting a blow dry? Like, are you insane? Shouldn't you be home like freaking out?" And like, I was like, "What? No, why should I? I have no control on this outcome, right? We have done our best. It's not in our control anymore. I will go get a blow dry and I will go out tonight,
Good.
And that doesn't change the fact that I'm still thinking about it, but I'm also going on with my life. And I think, I've sort of come to a place, at least today, where I'm like, it'll be okay. And if it's not okay, I'll be okay. And then once I can sort of, truly like believe that, don't always believe it, but I would say about 85% of the time, I do believe it. I don't operate from a place of fear at work, which would make things worse for me. So, so I don't know if that answers.
It certainly does, Fatin. It's because what you've done is you've described the person who was sitting in the car nearly 10 years ago, and you're describing yourself now, and we can see that what you described as earlier as putting in the work has actually given you the support and the tools where you don't sit in your car anymore, which is exactly what the work is about, right? It's a very abstract concept for many people, but you've done something in those years that allows you to be able to articulate that disassociation, that the business isn't me and I'm not the business. It's amazing.
But yet knowing who, or sort of being more in touch with who you are as a person. So knowing that it's not the business who made me, I made the business, me and my co-founders, and I will do everything to make sure it's a success. And if it's not, I will do something else.
No, those few last statements that you were making, all good?
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, please, we take care of the health as the first priority. But some of those last few statements that you were making, and especially the ones that are about sort of going deeper into who you are and the different layers and the association of that sort of equation of me equals business, and there is nothing else, like that's the only box. I think it's very powerful on a personal level. It makes me very happy, like very deep down because of the personal connection that we also have. It made me also think that I'm really, really hoping that the co-founders are listening of your business, because there was one thing that I also know for a fact that it's a lot to carry this for other co-founders in your business. So if maybe, let's see, this can sort of be a spark. We've talked about this many times, that there is a boundary. I also believe that everyone's a co-founder has in some way even the responsibility to do the work. But I hear you that everyone is on a different journey. So hopefully maybe today's conversation can be an inspiration.
I can say this openly because we are so open about it with us, amongst ourselves. I think a year and a half ago, we reached a point where I think the three of us wanted to kill each other, like actually. And it's the three of us. It wasn't 2 against 1. It was literally, I wanted to kill Adam. I wanted to kill Umar. Umar wanted to kill me. Umar wanted to kill Adam. Adam wanted to kill Umar. He wanted to kill me, And in those moments, I remember I used to just be like, we should go for couples counseling. There should be co-founder counseling, right?
I'll give you the contact for the co-founder therapist.
Yeah. So there should be co-founder counseling, because essentially, these are and they have become so much better. They have, kudos to them. they in their own ways, because we all have our own quirks. I have mine, Adam has his, Omar has his. I feel like Omar is overly optimistic, Adam is can be sometimes overly pessimistic, and then I'm sort of realistic, but I try being optimistic, not so much pessimistic anymore. But yeah, but when you choose to work with people, essentially, at least for me, everyone I love them. They're like family for me. Like I love them, and I know deep down. I mean, no matter what differences we have, so these are people you genuinely like and respect, which is why you have decided to start a business with them in the first place, right? So if there could just be a safe space where you could go in and discuss miscommunications, that we all come from different life experiences and backgrounds, and why we do certain things and why we don't. And that I just wish we could have had that space. I mean, we're in a much better space with each other, but we work on it amongst ourselves. I wish there could have been a space where partners or business partners or co-founders could go for like group therapy, like just talk about what's upsetting them about each other.
And we are
That
both
would be
smiling because we are both doing it in our own businesses. I know for a
Oh,
fact
okay,
that
nice.
Nektarios is
Okay.
doing it. I brought it to the guys here at Neem, and it's been life-changing in a way.
I'm
Yeah.
mindful of time, and our conversation sort of seems to come to a natural curve. But before we do that, I have a question where I'd like to bring it back to you, Fatin, which is, with everything that you shared with us, with your initial experience, even as an adolescent, and then the 10 years ago car moment, and where you are now, what is your warning system? What is the mechanism that makes you go, hang on a second, I recognize this feeling, or I recognize the thought, that leads you then to apply the toolkit? Do you have something like this?
Yeah, I literally feel it in my body, right? It's two things. It's basically, you have a thought and it's just a thought and it crosses, and then you have a thought and then it goes into a loop, and then other things start adding, and then it just gets like sort of scary. So when I see my thoughts go into a loop, the first time that day I won't think much of it. The third time it comes up, I'm like, this is where we're going, So once that, and the other one is very, very physical sensations that you feel, like a racing heart, or just shortness, of breath, and not in a dramatic way at all. Like you could just be sitting, like typing, and then you're just like, okay, I'm a little jittery, And what I do for that is that I go back, and because I've identified that for me, a lot of it comes up when there's a lack of control on the outcome or a situation. I go back and I'm like, okay, what can I not control today? What is it that's out of my control today that I would have liked to control? Sometimes they're really big things. And sometimes they're also very small things, by the way, like something really tiny where I'm like, no, why can't I think of something? Why can't I think of something? And then it comes to me and I'm like, that's why you're feeling like this. So the minute you sort of step away from that thought and like kind of make that connection, like it loses again its
You're
power,
naming
its
it, bringing
strength,
it to consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sort of does it. It sort of does that. So I think so. Yeah. So that really helps me. So usually a lack of control on a situation, intentional or unintentional, is a trigger. And it's a trigger I have to handle because we can't always have control on outcomes of situations. And another trigger for me is aggressive voices, male aggressive voices. Yeah, I think, like it again sends me into the same sensation. And yeah, I can't stand male aggressive voices. I'm not scared of them, so they don't freak me out like that. I just have no space for them in my sort of day or my life. I do not respect aggressive people. I do not appreciate aggression. And I'm very reactive to it. So aggression is a trigger for me, male aggression in terms of voices or how they speak. And I have a zero tolerance policy for that now, to the extent that like people aren't as aggressive with me anymore because I would just sort of, how like if someone's aggressive, you cow back, right? And then if someone's aggressive, And it's not my nature to be aggressive, but if they're aggressive with me, I'll just look on the table and be aggressive right back. They won't, it's less likely to happen again because they don't like it when a girl, is assertive with them. So yeah, so these two things trigger me usually: lack of control and aggression. Yeah.
Lots in there. I was looking at Nektarios. I think we are to wrap it up for today.
Yes, I wanted, the last thing you just said, Fatin, it's one of those things that's really super important to us. When we want people to take one thing away from the work we do at the Future Farm, is everything has to start with introspection and self-awareness. And you describing quite easily, comfortably, your triggers. Is great because it shows that that when these happenings, you no longer ignore them, you no longer pretend they're not happening. So there's the acknowledgement, and then there's also knowing what to do. So our conversation today for me was just done exactly what we want the Future Farm to do, and what the podcast is meant to do, which is show people that the entrepreneurial journey is not easy. Nobody pretends it's going to be any easier. It's how you respond to the challenges that you're facing. But you have to start with something that is from within. It's nothing to do with the outside that you can't control. So I really just wanted to thank you for being so open, so vulnerable, and so eloquent about it. But also for leaving people with that hope that you can move from the woman in the car to the person who can go into the office and be in the safe space.
100%. I mean, after that experience, I've opened two more businesses after that, right? How well they do, we'll see. But like I said, not my self-worth isn't really tied there anymore, but all my energy and passion is very much there. The other thing, on an ending note would be that, anxiety is one thing, but the anxiety of having anxiety is another thing, right? Because once you are in a good place, you don't want to go back there. And it's so important for people to know that even if you do, it's okay, because it's a wave that you have to ride. It's not something that, leaves you forever, right? Like, so almost like a flu, you won't just you won't have a flu once in your life. Like, you'll have a flu multiple times in your life. Sometimes it'll be worse, sometimes it'll be very normal. It's a wave you have to ride. But as long as you understand that, because as long as you understand that you're not regressing, because first, when I would feel it again, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm regressing. I'm going back to where I started. No, it's just a pause. And then you bring out your toolkit and you deal with it. And then it's over. And then you move forward again. Right? So I think, just sort
You've
of...
been training the muscle.
Yeah, sort of being like, okay, no, I'm not going to sit here and waste time having anxiety of having anxiety again. And if I do have it, I'll ride the wave and I'll be fine. Then we'll be good.
One more thing just to say, I think it's absolutely fantastic that you have been a role model today with us to also other founders in Pakistan and maybe in other markets where people feel that we don't talk about these things and it actually makes someone rather weak. You've shown the absolute opposite, and I'm super, super proud of you, and can't wait to bring this episode out to the live and share it widely. So thank you for that, Fatin, and cheering you, for everything that's ahead of you and for who you are as Fatin at large.
Thank you. There's just so much exciting stuff going on right now, and life is good.
Very good. So keep taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fatin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.